Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. Be a very interesting topic. Mostly because I just asked Mother Mary. I says, "What do most people need right now?" And as you know, I've been channeling Mother Mary for about 2 weeks now publicly. But on this day, I normally give my talk to my Starseed group, or for highly evolved souls in general. Uh, but in this case, I said to Mother Mary, what do people need? And she took me to this book, My Mother, Myself by Nancy Friday, and she told me to read page 112. First I thought it was going to be 111, but no, it was 112. And it's very, very specific. It describes specifically how mothers show more physical affection to their sons, but they don't even apparently. I mean, I'm not going to read from here because every time I read from a book, I get this message from Facebook saying, copyright, bleep bleep bleep, warning warning warning. Hello Teresa and Shuri and everybody else has joined in, but long story short, hello Emma. It says, and I'm not allowed to read it, but it basically says, I had to put it down. It says that mothers don't really hug or give a lot of tactile or physical contact with their daughters, and boys get that quite a lot. But that's not the only thing that Mother Mary wants me to talk about. She wants me to talk about relationships that highly evolved women, well, starseed women, have with their mothers. And you think, well, okay, Edward, you're a bloke, what would you know? Well, actually, I kind of know quite a lot. And so, sorry, itchy. No, it's not itchy. It's actually water from the bath. Okay. So, what do I know about relationships that daughters have with their mothers as a starseed coach? Well, about 30 years ago, I was deeply fascinated in feminist New Age or feminist psychology, and I personally met Cher Hite, Shere. Last name Hite, and she did a study of women's sexuality, and also Nancy Friday. And I did read this book, My Mother, Myself, by Nancy Friday about 30 odd years ago. And then when I was living in Los Angeles, I met Judy Chicago. Judy Chicago, well, actually, that's a lie. I didn't actually meet her. She communicated with me extensively, and she wanted me to work on one of her sculptures. Long story short, she got some locals to carve this big goddess woman with a banner around its waist, to thine own self be true, translated in many different languages, and it was done badly. And she said, well, can you, Edward, as an English woodcarver, can you improve upon it? And I said, ethical debate, like, you want me to fix someone's botched job, my name doesn't go on it if I can't really repair something that's been done badly. Anyway, the reason I mentioned Judy Chicago is that she used to paint vaginas on dinner plates. There's no other way of putting it, really. That's what she did at the time. Well, maybe it wasn't dinner plates, but it was circular canvases. So I've kind of had a bit of a history in feminist psychology, and I won't go on to my ramifications with the humanistic psychology movement and all that. I'll just say hello to Julie and everybody else joining in. Okay. And also my contact with clients over the last 25 or 30 odd years. So let's get right into the ramifications. I might parallel process with Mother Mary and bring in what she wants me to bring in at the same time or later on, and I'll let you know if I'm doing that. Generational effects. Now, what are generational effects? Well, I know from my mother. My mother was a very permissive, out there 1960, or she wasn't, she was born 1929, but in the 60s she did a lot of drugs and a lot of flower power, and like they all did, anyway, but generational effects is that mostly, if you're watching this now, your mother probably had less opportunities, and this is kind of stating the obvious, but particularly if you're a highly evolved soul. And if you know about the 5 stages of soul development, if you're a starseed or a highly evolved soul, you might have a mother that's a baby soul or a young soul, and they're trying to achieve security. They're in a marriage that may or may not be working. My mother had other, I won't say it was too personal, what she did. She's in heaven, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so generational effects, they had lesser opportunities. In the 60s, they got the pill, so they got that freedom that the pill gave them for the first time, and there were a lot of women divorcing at that time. So without stating the obvious, let's just think about your mother. If you're a highly evolved soul, if you're a starseed, think about your mother and what she had at her disposal at that time, and how that would have affected her relationship with you, and how she treated you. Well, she probably couldn't control her womb that much because the pill had only just come into being. Also, there wasn't the social services. Like when my mother divorced my dad, she did a lot of naughty things. She sold many things and to buy clothes and dresses, and she lived in a small flat, and she had to work as a waitress in the evenings, and had 2 jobs just to cope, because there weren't the social services to back her up and supporting her through going through that process. And there wasn't even things like women's refuge, if you got raped or whatever, had problems. So sorry if I'm talking too fast, I'm just trying to get through the basics quickly. So basically your mum probably didn't have much at her disposal, and those are generational effects from the 1960s, and you probably know this already. But I'm getting into the more advanced stages of what Nancy Friday is talking about, and what Mother Mary wants me to tell you is that apparently, we'll go through some of the basics. Jealousy is a problem because women see their daughters getting more physical affection and love and hugs from their fathers, or their which is their husband, obviously, or the partner, right? So jealousy can be a problem. And then this physical contact. Apparently mothers don't hug and show as much contact to their daughters, and when they want to give approval, they give smiles and sort of a nice look. And that's what Nancy Friday talks about quite a lot, and the psychologists that back her up. And I'm going to go back into these. And then also fear. Fear is a big component, and that's why apparently Nancy Friday talks about mothers dressing their little girls in little frilly white dresses, and they're trying to keep them pure because they remember, their first, date rape, or in a car, in Hollywood, like sleeping in the back of a car, or not. I say sleeping. But anyway, their first experiences, and then feeling muddied by that, and the shame if they were Christians, or if they didn't get their family approval by dating the bad boy. Anyway, so that fear that when they have this little baby girl, that they will project their fear onto that baby girl and try and protect her, and she'll protect her by giving her these excessive purity images, pretty white dress, Shirley Temple. I've done so many psychic readings where I've had a mother or a father dead in spirit, on the other side, and they bring through these images where there's a little girl in a frilly white dress, and I say, "Was that you?" And said, "I can't." Oh, no, I never put a judgment. Say, "I can't imagine it," but they said, And the point being is, this is what mothers do. They try and give that purity for protection. So those are the kind of ramifications of what's going on in general. And then I'm going to talk about highly evolved souls and starseeds and how they're injecting into that process in addition. So to go back, let's just think about this. Well, if you had a mother that was jealous of you for getting too much attention from your dad, that's going to create lots of problems. And then the sexual politics within the family get really, really complicated. I'm not going to kind of go dark and mysterious on this topic. I just want you to use your imagination of what mothers might be feeling, and jealousy from and I don't want to go there because I don't need to. But just think about that. I mean, I know someone that I babysit for right now, and when I go and visit them, when the little girl comes home from school, the first thing she does is jump on daddy's lap, and the dad gives her a hug. I don't see her going to the mother so much. I've seen it a tiny bit. And then even with the play, I even saw, the father rolling a plastic ball to knock over some things or something, and there was down the corridor, and that was, father and daughter as well. And this child's actually adopted, but still, those patterns still play out really, really strongly. So let's think if you're a starseed or a highly evolved soul, and you've got that scenario where and I know someone in Texas who's got very loving memories of their father and this typical type of behavior. So if you're a starseed or a highly evolved soul, and what that throws into the mix, well, you might have a mother. I mean, it'd be lucky if you had a mother that was a starseed, fine, but quite often you're not going to. You might have either a reptilian or a baby soul or a young soul as a mum. And you think about that mum that's feeling inadequate. She grew up maybe early 50s and 60s, didn't have opportunities, and then she's jealous of you because, if you're a starseed girl, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you'll be radiant and shining, full of light, really, really bright. And so the mother immediately is going to be jealous of maybe your looks and maybe your bright energy and the charisma and how that affects, your dad, and then all the attention you're getting. And that's quite a common thing. I'm not trying to say that all starseed girls or highly evolved girls are going to be more attractive than the general population, but I kind of am. Because it's kind of a fact that, now this is a funny thing, starseeds in general, we don't have to go through the ugly lesson. And I really am loath to use that expression, but the ugly lesson basically is this, is that, it's kind of the way that beauty relates to God, and that if you're this gets really politically correct, wrangling my hands, but basically that idea of not being physically attractive, starseeds don't have that problem. We don't have to work through that lesson. So humans do. Humans go through the test of money and the test of being physically unattractive or disabled or whatever, but starseeds and highly evolved souls, we don't need those lessons, so we don't have them. So in general, starseed little girls can be either attractive or just have bright, radiant charisma shining through their eyes. And I see it all the time. I mean, I don't go around like shopping malls looking for little girls. That's not what I do. But when I do see a starseed child, it's really obvious. Now, if you think when you were young, you're going to get lots of attention and everybody for being radiant, okay, just radiating joy. And think about how your mother looks upon that. And you might think, okay, Edward, this is stating the obvious, but maybe you haven't thought about that. Maybe if you've got a low self-esteem, even as a highly evolved soul, have you really thought about the way your mum perceived you? When you came into this world, a bundle of joy, radiating lots of charisma, and then how she perceives that? Well, of course, she's going to be jealous. So jealousy is a number one problem, and more so if you're starseed or highly evolved soul. And then secondly, not getting physical touch. If she's jealous, or if for whatever reason she's not showing you much physical affection, then there's going to be more distance between you and your mother, but more closeness between you and your father. So I know I have a lot of highly evolved female clients that have got wonderful relationships with their father generally. I mean, sometimes they had a narcissistic father or abuse or whatever, but quite a lot of the time, starseed girls have, I've experienced, good relationships with their father and not so much with their mother. I mean, this is highly generalized, of course. And then less physical touch. So then that also affects your sexual relationships, because if you didn't get much touch from the mother, then that nurturing touch is going to be more difficult. I've got to turn off my notifications so I don't get little bells. That's right, I forget to do that. So yes, so just think about that if you don't get much physical touch from your mum, you're gonna go towards your dad's energy, and that's okay for sexual development, but for the kindness and and care that you needed, and the feminine energy you needed some modeling, right? So modeling basically is this: is that you learn from your mother those finer points of personality, and that's why mothers do really, really well when they sometimes do baking or shared activities. Or years ago it was always baking and sewing, right? You know, those shared activities. But mothers don't bake anymore and they don't sew anymore. So that bonding rituals that mothers did with their daughters are hugely important. And I belong to some vintage sewing groups. I don't belong to any baking, but I belong to lots of New Zealand vintage Facebook groups. And all of those women that had those rituals with their mothers around baking and sewing, or sewing or knitting or crochet, they seem to balance their male and female energies better. I do know highly evolved women that have only had male role modeling through their fathers, and they're very successful in business. They're very, I'm not saying they're aggressive, but they're very go-get-'em. But that softer side, or even when they can't bake a cake and they can't sew, I mean, excuse these politically incorrect roles, and I just no intention of doing that whatsoever. I'm just using illustrations. But the point I'm trying to make is that there needs to be rituals between mother and daughter around activities for shared bonding experience. Right here where my finger is pointing, you can see a really huge, what do you call that thing? Rolling pin. Yeah, rolling pin. It's covered in flour and I use it all the time. So I've got bonding rituals with my dad in the workshop, with wood carving, and with my mother. When I was 3 years old, we always baked cakes together. And literally, I would help her, and I'd put the sugar in, and I'd lick the spoon. So think about those bonding rituals, and did you get that equally from your mum or your dad? So as a highly evolved soul, to remind you again, just think about the fact that if you had all this charisma and all this light, how does your mother perceive you? Did she give you touch? Did she bond with you through those sharing rituals, or did you only get that from your dad? And then around the subject of fear, of her projecting her own limitations upon you, this is probably going to be the biggest area of contention. Now, what do I mean by the biggest area of contention? Well, if you're growing up and learning that you're a starseed, and it could have happened when you were 16, it could have happened in your 20s or 30s or even later, then you kind of know that you've got this charisma. It's always there. There may be other signs to learn that you're a starseed. But if your mother was inadequate or feeling jealous, then that will be one of the biggest damaging effects, and her fear. And why that is because fear centers around lots and lots of limitations. So a non-starseed or a non-highly evolved soul is going to have problems with feeling adequate, problems with overcompensating, or a whole different series of ramifications. And so, as you're developing, you naturally know that you're a starseed, and you naturally feel your charisma, but your mother doesn't get it. She knows there's something special about you, so the first thing she's going to do is she's going to talk you down. She's going to undermine you. What else is she going to do? Just generally, it's going to create a schism between you and your mother. And the more highly evolved you are, the bigger this problem's going to be. So, what are some of the solutions? Now, one of the solutions that I've thought about quite interestingly enough is that daughters tend to get on better with their grandmothers. And as I've talked about these, vintage sewing groups and women who bake and whatever, a lot of young girls, get those bonding rituals from their grandmothers. So if their mother's too busy at work, the grandmother's got time to share, crochet granny squares, or bake a cake, or use the rolling pin, and so good solution is to bond with your grandmother, or you probably already did this. I imagine there's probably quite a lot of women who are watching right now, and they're a highly evolved soul, a starseed, and they didn't get on so well with their mother, but they had wonderful relationships with their grandmother. So if you think about when your grandmother died, if that was particularly traumatic for you as a woman, then you could be more bonded to your grandmother. And even if we think about society, like that I channel Mother Mary, and we have lots of symbolic imagery around Mother Mary being, the supreme mother. And then when women and feminists and New Age women or women in general try to bond with their motherly images or femininity, they don't have much of a model. There's a really good book called Women Who Run With Rules by Wolves by Koto Robles. I forget how to pronounce her name. Anyway, and she writes about that. Now, but what we do have, Mother Mary basically is the mother of Jesus, and the problem is that Mother Mary didn't have any daughters. And I think if Mother Mary had daughters, or a daughter, today in our society we might have more role models or more images, if you like, in our culture of women showing love to their daughters, but we don't. And then we've got Anna. And there was a woman, I'm trying to remember her name, I think her name was called Claire Hartsong. Claire Hartsong apparently channeled grandmother Saint Anne or Anna, which is basically Mother Mary's mother. So Mother Mary's mother is the only image that we have in our culture of a woman showing love to a daughter. And so the imagery is just not there. And the most granted image of mothers we have is Mother Mary, but she only had a son. She didn't have a daughter. So this is one of the solutions, and I'll ask Mother Mary for more solutions, but one of the solutions obviously is grandmothers. And so if you are that lucky to have bonding rituals and time with your grandmother, you'll be very lucky. So what's the solution for all this? Well, it's the same solution for starseeds in general, is that as you take ownership of your own light, and as you work on yourself and develop yourself, you'll shine and radiate and heal yourself generally. And you have to accept your mother's limitations and to know that, your mother may have grown up in the 40s, 50s, 60s or 70s when there weren't as many opportunities. So don't beat yourself up. Don't give yourself a hard time, or any self-blame or whatever, because your mother probably didn't have the opportunities that you do. You may have been able to read books, like by Nancy Friday, or you may have had the opportunities like Judy Chicago to, paint vaginas on big, wall hangings and get in touch with, vagina monologues. You may have been able to read and do research into women's sexual fantasies like share height, but chances are your mother didn't. My mother was incredibly progressive for her time, and she made a lot more effort in that area, but she did have a daughter. My mother did have a daughter, but she adopted it out immediately because she dated an American officer in the wartime, and when he found out she was pregnant, he opted to go back to America, and he didn't support her, so she was pregnant, and then she got rid of her daughter. So I remember my mother on the telephone, and then she got off the phone and she just went white as a ghost, and she just stared down at the ground. She was shocked, and she walked out of the kitchen and she said, Ted, I've got something to tell you. And I said, what? And she was white as a ghost, and she said, well, I'm trying to remember what her words were. She said, well, something like, you've got a sister. It was just something like that. It was just classic. And I was really shocked. And my mother didn't have much contact with her. I think she got a letter after that and maybe some photographs. I don't think there was maybe one other conversation. So if you think about, pre the pill and pre-war or in those times, if you were pregnant without support, and even today we're dealing with the Roe and Wade controversy, I mean, that's going to create huge ramifications and problems for mother-daughter relationships, and it's just going to, well, I'm trying to be hopeful. Yeah, Roe and Wade is a big problem, and I'm not going to go into Roe and Wade. As you rightly know, in America, it's just the talk of the town. So now I'm going to try and tune in and talk to Mother Mary and see whether or not she would like to add something in addition. But one of the solutions is grandmothers. The other second solution for Starseeds is shine your light and work on yourself generally, and then be realistic about your mother's limitations and let yourself off the hook first, and then let your mother off the hook, and then maybe do some visualization exercises of sort of happy memories with you and your grandmother, and then try and forgive your mother. I do hypnosis around that with clients, and it gets really complicated. I have a conversation between you and your inner child, and then a conversation between you and your mother, and then a conversation between your inner child and your mother, and then I bring your grandmother in, and then I have a conversation between you and your grandmother, and your inner child and your grandmother, and then have a conversation between your grandmother and your mother, and you get them being happy and making peace, and then you see your mother's face change. I'm giving away all my trade secrets, by the way. And then when you see your mother melting and changing and shifting, then finally you have a conversation with your mother, and then your inner child sits on your mother's lap and bonds with your mother, which is what you should have got when you were young, but you didn't. So those are my trade secrets. That's everything you do in self-hypnosis. It's quite complicated, as you can see. So now we've had a torrent of rain lately, but I'm going to tune into Mother Mary and see if there's anything she would like to add. Okay, here we go. Okay, just hold a sec. I just discovered a new starseed today, so they messaged me, but let me see what's going on. Okay, she speaks to me really quickly. She says, yes, indeed, Edward. This is Mother Mary. She showed me an image of painting, being an artist, so let me just see what's going on here. Mother Mary's shown me an image of painting. You can do it as an inner child exercise, or you can do it as an artist exercise, but Mother Mary's strongly suggesting, I'll double check with her if that's okay, that you do some artwork. It could be left-handed drawing, or at the basic inner child level, or it could just be you. But images are basically mother and daughter, and the love and the bonding, because if you only got affection from your father, but you never got bonding and love from your mother, you might need to do some artwork, some painting, or left-handed drawing, or just imagery in general of a mother and a daughter bonding and sitting on the lap or hugging, and you've got to find a way to bring that in. Mother Mary's showing me right now. Let me just double check. Okay, she's saying yes, indeed, Edward. So what she's showing me is that if you didn't get that from your mother, you can do that from the universal mother, or you can actually ask Mother Mary directly. So let me. She wants to talk to me about this. Just hold a second. So yes, indeed, Edward. If people ask me, I will give them that bonding experience. So Mother Mary is showing me that if you didn't get it from your mum, you can get it from the universal mother energy, or no, I say that glibly, but really, Mother Mary is saying directly that if you pray and ask her directly, she will give you an energy connection, or a modelling, or a love experience of a mother and a daughter, and you can use Mother Mary directly for that. She's told me just now that if you want to do that, that's actually quite powerful, and she'll give you that. Basically, let me see what else she wants to say. I'll just say. So yes, indeed, Edward. This is Mother Mary. It can be very powerful. Let me see what else she wants to go into. She said, yes, indeed, Edward. Art can be a very powerful tool for transformation. So, yes, indeed, Edward. Mothers want to be forgiven. So, a lot of mothers. So, if you're a starseed or a highly evolved soul now, and if you just think about your mother who was inadequate, she felt less than, had less opportunities, probably might have even got raped or sexually abused by her father, and then from the shame, maybe even rejected from her own mother. So, it's rejection upon rejection. So, if you think about your mother and the experience she had, and all that shame and all that self-hatred that she has, that she projects into you, and all that pain, your mothers want to be forgiven. And if you're a starseed or a highly evolved soul, I mean, already off the bat, you're really lucky, because you're privileged, because you've got that beautiful charisma and vibration. And if you're still got problems with your mother, just think, if she's a baby soul or a young soul, she will want to be forgiven, even if she can't voice that. Even if she's a narcissist, then she can't voice that, because she has so much shame and self-hatred that she can't bring herself to. So you have to be the one. I know it's difficult to say, but you have to be the one to initiate. Sometimes with a narcissist, they won't be heard. They won't hear you, and sometimes you can just do it energetically. Sometimes you can't do it verbally. Like with my dad, how I shifted it, I just said, love you, Dad, and then hung up the phone. And I did that for about a year, and after about a year, he said, yeah, love you, Dad, or whatever. So it's the same for mothers. Is that all that shame and that self-hatred and that neglect that they grew up with? They can't bring themselves to be the initiator and saying, yes, I'm sorry, I wasn't a good enough mother, please forgive me. I mean, a lot of them can't do that. So just place yourself in that higher frequency of being a starseed or a highly evolved soul, and just realize what your mother can't do. And then realize that she wants to be forgiven. Let me just check in with Mary again. Just hold a sec. She said, yes, indeed, Edward, you have covered that well. Let me see. I'm starting to channel here every day now. Okay, this is funny. All right, then, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Said, yes, indeed, Edward, you have covered it well. There's nothing more to add. Okay, just to go into a summary, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I skim through huge swathes of topics, and sometimes glibly or summarily, but really there's a lot to unpack there. So just the generational effects of what was going on for your mother back then, the Cher Height, the Nancy Friday, the Judy Chicago feminist psychology that was happening in the 60s, and that's a lot to unpack there if you want to do your own research and your own study. And Nancy Friday, My Mother, Myself, is a great book, a wonderful place to start, and I was enthralled. And even as a man, I wanted to understand what women are going through. It wasn't about my mother. It was about understanding, when I have a relationship with a girlfriend, I want to be as compassionate and aware as I fully can. And even 30 years ago, even when I was an atheist, because I was spiritual only 25 years ago, but I read this about 30 years ago when I was involved in psychology, and I still want to understand women better. So, there's all that. Then there's understanding about the jealousy of their father's attention, and how women don't tend to hug and show physical affection to their daughters. The daughters that have had ritualized behavior around baking and sewing and cooking and cleaning, in the household, excuse the politically incorrect associations. I don't care. That's just who I am. They fare better. And then on the subject of fear, being inadequate, having limitations, and then the purity problem of how they project their daughters, and don't want them to suffer the way they suffered. And all of that's written in Nancy Friday, My Mother, Myself, and elucidated very, very well. I apologise to my non-English speakers out there that I haven't spoken very clearly or very slowly in this talk. Sometimes I get excited. I talk fast. I will try and slow down and enunciate in the future. I think the topic's finished. Mother Mary brought in solutions of honour your grandmother, trying to and then try and find a mother-daughter imagery in your mind, and if you can't, through artwork, you can call on Mother Mary directly and have a meditation or a visualization where Mother Mary is showing you kindness and affection. I know I certainly did it with my inner child, with Jesus. I used to do a real deep meditation. If you want meditation techniques or hypnosis techniques, you can just ask me or ask someone that you trust. But I walked up the temple steps in Jerusalem and I saw Jesus sitting there with some children, and my inner child will go up there and sit with him. And Jesus spent some time with my inner child, and it was a very beautiful experience. Funny enough, even though I've got Mother Mary as my guide, I've never had any of these inner child nurturing visualizations with her. Maybe I should have. Okay. I'm sure there are lots of other solutions that would come to me in time, but I hope this has helped someone. This goes on YouTube, so hit those buttons. You know the buttons. Ding ding, Edward James Tagg, Starseed coach, inner child therapist. What else do I do? Psychic clairvoyant medium, angel skills trainer, spiritual enlightenment coach, blah de blah de blah. You know the story. Lovely to meet you. Have a lovely day. I will endeavour to speak clearer and slowly in the future. Promise, promise, promise. And as you know, I'm bringing through Mother Mary a lot more because I'm actually finding it easier than I anticipated. When people channel, sometimes they have anticipatory fear. So, yes, done and dusted. Love to you all. Hugs, and think about your mothers and how they're suffering right now. If your mother's still alive, chances are she will have some self-regret and inadequacy around how she brought you up, and there'll be ramifications that spin on into the future. A bird just brought something. What did he do? God, that was interesting. Oh, it's a blackbird with a huge lump of bread in its mouth. Okay, that's a good place to finish. Love to you all. Bye for now.